The Game of Zen explores the often overlooked ways in which professional, personal, and spiritual growth are interrelated. We dive deep into the life teachings of the Buddha and the mindfulness practices of Zen, revealing how they can help us dramatically expand our possibilities for wholehearted work, life, and play.
Hello, and welcome to a new episode of the Game of Zen podcast. My name is Scott Berman, checking in from Philadelphia, PA. As always, joined by my good friend, Sensei Paul from Boulder, Colorado. What's up, Paul? How you doing today?
Hey, Scott. Good to see you again. I'm doing really well. It's a nice little kind of change of season in a sense here in Boulder. I had a nice potluck with my Zen center over the weekend, and boy, there's a lot of talent in the group that I didn't know about. People broke out the guitars and the voices, and it was just amazing. Really
That's
got
awesome.
a nice talented Thanga here. And then today is the start of school here for my teenagers here in Colorado. So it's a kind of a season shift, even though it's still baking hot out. Things are a changing.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I do. I remember those days back to school. I'm past it finally, but it was always a good time of year to get the kids ready. Yeah. Fantastic. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. We have another cool episode for you. And as we've been doing lately, we're going to take some notes from Paul's latest newsletter. And this one is called The End of Folly, Beyond Performative Loyalty, Goodness, and Wisdom. Lots of good stuff in this. And I also want to compliment you on the photo you used, Paul, in this one. I really like it. And you can find that on Substack. So let me start off with one of your quotes, and then you can expand on it. In your newsletter, you say, I think we can all see how our individual moral senses move upward through the sequence. We start in confusion, affirm loyalty, learn a sense of propriety or right behavior. We establish a deeper sense of fairness and justice, and then advance to the more encompassing levels of benevolence and goodness. Love that quote. Tell me more about it.
Yeah, so it's meant to respect that our kind of consciousnesses go through this evolution in terms of who we are and what is right and what is good. This is the essence of the spiritual path, and it's quite an evolution. We start out with in kind of innocence, but really kind of confusion about who we are and what's right and what is good. But then we kind of go to progressively higher levels of sort of inclusion, which also involve higher levels of responsiveness and responsibility that each of us take on. So the levels are, starting in folly or confusion. Then we kind of give our loyalty, to an authority figure. It could be our parents, it could be a creed, it could be a religion, it could be some other source of authority, if you will. Then we kind of start to develop an inner sense of, what's right and wrong, of right behavior. And then we kind of cultivate that inner senses of fairness and then justice, right and wrong. So these start to develop, but then we get to even higher levels of benevolence and goodness. So benevolence, I'm calling well-meaning, and actually that's the derivation of the word benevolence. Volere means to want. So you want well, you mean well. That's benevolence. People think, oh, benevolence, it might be something like, oh, I'm just a do-gooder in a way. But it's actually a higher level of attitude to have, benevolence, and then even goodness, right? So goodness, I'm calling well-doing. So benevolence is well-meaning, you have good intentions, but then you're actually doing good. That is the highest level. Well, it's not quite the highest level. It's the second to highest level, because we're going to go into the Daoist quote, that I was going off on. But, these higher levels of really meaning well and then really doing good are evolutions and expansions of these lower levels of fairness and justice and loyalty and things like that. So does that kind of resonate for you?
Absolutely. And I was thinking about how there's two things that seem to happen at the same time. One, I'm getting older every day. I don't know about you, but I am. But also I'm learning and growing and I feel like you get to higher levels naturally just by aging and going through school and graduation and having children, et cetera. But also practice, reading, doing this with you and things like that. So how does that kind of dovetail where it naturally you get better and less confused when you get older, but then you also add in the practice and that accelerates your growth?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's a really good question, Scott. And I think my answer to that is that we just we open ourselves up to more and more realm of action, meaning we take more responsibility, and we also open ourselves up to more capacity for meeting others and for taking in, information and power, from the universe. So it's we can stop at any of these levels. I mean, I think naturally our maturation as we get older, it does give us the opportunity to, in a sense, embrace more power and open ourselves up to more responsiveness and capacity for others. But we don't all do that. Sometimes we keep ourselves small and we say, well, this is the only thing I'm responsible for. It's maybe my own bank account or my family's well-being. And that's it, and we can stop there and not necessarily really internalize a more bigger ship, if you will, a bigger purview, of our own lives. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I also believe too, very strongly that this is a process that never should end really. And you should keep moving forward, keep growing, keep learning. I do find some people around my age maybe are sort of set in their ways more, or they're not as progressive with their change and learning. But I'm obsessed with getting better every day in any aspect. And I think it's really, you look at over time, things build up and add up, and you look at yourself from 10 years ago. I'm a much different person. Mm-hmm. Why? Well, I've grown, I've learned, I've changed my eating habits, I've read 100 books, so those things kind of add to everything that I am today. And I would like to get better tomorrow as well.
Yeah. And you have a consciousness around integrating those things, right? Some people don't necessarily have that. So you're on the spiritual path, which is to open yourselves up to bigger and bigger dimensions of your own being.
Yeah. And I also, of course, as we always talk about, this applies to many aspects of your life. It could apply to your business and your work life and your personal life, your marriage, et cetera, your children. And so there's all different ways that this applies. And I really like that a lot.
Yeah. I could actually, comment just on that in terms of like the professional progression. If you think of like stages of job, career, and vocation, right? So job is like more of the existential level, where you're supporting your life, you're supporting your life in a sense. The career is where it actually becomes something where, you want to be working for, in the service of certain values, and you're going to have a bigger purview around what it is you're supporting. It could be your life, your family, your community, maybe there's a mission that you're doing with your career. So it becomes even bigger, but then there's an even bigger level, which could be a vocation, where you're opening yourself up to like a even bigger level of doing good, right? And doing well, meaning at a even bigger scale. So yeah, you can look at those levels.
Yeah. And I also think when you become a parent too, then you watch your children go to different levels and learn from new things. And I just wanted to share real quick that my youngest daughter just got a promotion yesterday to a new title.
Congratulations.
So so like 2 years ago, she had an internship, and then last year she graduated college and got her first job. And then a year went by, and now she's got this promotion. And I was just talking to her about levels, and I said, listen, you're here, you're going up one level, but you got a lot of levels to go. And this is just a really great step. And I was very proud of her.
Yeah, good. Well, congratulations to her.
Yeah. So that's cool. So I want to read another quote that you led off with in your newsletter about Tao. And when Tao is lost, there is goodness. When goodness is lost, there is kindness, benevolence. When kindness is lost, there is justice. When justice is lost, there is ritual. Now, ritual is the husk of faith and loyalty, the beginning of confusion. Knowledge of the future is only a flowery trapping of Tao. It is the beginning of folly. So I'd love to hear more on that one.
Yeah, so this is kind of the framework that I was using to make my reflections. And it's so interesting how Laozi in this text, he actually starts from the highest level, which is Tao, which is to be fully organically integrated with the wisdom unfolding in the world, right? So that's kind of what the Tao is, to be one with that. And he works backwards from that. And in the things that I've been saying, in the last few minutes had to do with building up, from the beginning level of confusion. But he's like, well, we're all natural. If we just were natural, if we lived our lives the way water flows down a waterfall or down a river, then everything would be in accord. But that's not really how it is. So when we lose, so he walks back down through those stages. When we lose that organic, intrinsic unfolding of wisdom, then we've got this sense of goodness, which is good. I mean, it's still a very high level, of consciousness to be at. But yet, we can fall, right? So we go downwards, we degrade from a sense of goodness, then to a sense of fairness, to a sense of justice, to a sense of propriety, to a sense of confusion. And then we're, then we think, okay, well, now it's all just about knowing what's happening, just what's going on. That's not a wisdom eye. That's kind of at our level of, artificial intelligence or, stock market picking is like, we think we know the future, but that's just the flowery trappings of the Tao, is to think we know what's going to happen. It's not really is being so internalized with what's happening that it's a part of us. And that's the beginning of folly, to think that even matters what's going to happen.
Right. So when you say the beginning of folly, but not the end of folly.
Yeah.
Right. So that's when you start to maybe lose the Tao that you have gained. So how does that happen, and how do you regain it? Yeah.
Well, that's a really good question. I mean, that's the heart of it right there. In my experience, that's kind of what spiritual practice is, to unify ourselves with the fundamental wisdom unfolding of the universe. So, Zen has a path for that, which does allow us to, more deeply and more consistently enter into that connection, that place with the universe. I guess the easy answer is, how do we lose that? Well, so much in our world just is constantly causing us to lose that. When we attach to stimulation, when we attach to outer conditions, when we try to control the world, when we try to push the river, then we lose the river. So all of the myriad ways that that present obstacles for us to be fully present in our lives, that's how we lose it. But what about you?
Well, I find it's like you're on the train tracks, and sometimes you're moving quickly and everything's going great, and then sometimes you slow down, and sometimes you get off track. And so what I try and do with the ups and downs of life is really come back to the center and come back to the practice and meditation, and really just, regroup a lot of times. And I think that the older I've gotten and the better I've gotten at this, and a lot of it has to do with practice and learning these things, because I recognize that something's off, or some external thing happened that I'm reacting to. Definitely could be attachment. I've had work things that I was involved with for a lot, and then they changed. And so, okay, maybe there's a period of time where the bardo, when I'm in between, and then I get back on track, and then I start to move a little faster. And so I think it's almost a daily thing, really. But I also find that I think I get back on track faster than I used to. Is that something that comes with just wisdom, you think, or?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. It comes back faster, and then you want it to be continuous, and it is possible to be continuous. One of my students, who just launched her own beautiful and amazing, Substack, where you can put it in the notes here, Sam Sokyo Randall, she has this expression, life living life as life. Life living life as life. So that's the Tao. That's the Tao right there. So to kind of, maybe answer that question, how do we lose it in a more pointed way? I guess I would say when I experience my life that way, as life living life as life, now I'm on the Tao, I'm on the way. But if it's not that, if it's me living life as X, Y, and Z, me having some experiences, Paul having some experiences, and these things happening to him, and he needing to do all of these things, all of that self-centered ness, and that's the sort of main orientation of myself. That's what we're losing. That's what we're losing. And I guess it also speaks to how we're losing it, is by to feed that self-centeredness.
Yeah, and I also think about, in your newsletter, you say like the future is simply not knowable. And I find that that's very powerful, because I think that that's what adds to, sometimes when you get off track, it's because you imagine the future being a certain way, and then it doesn't turn out that way, or something else completely happens that you're not expecting. And so how do you live with the ups and downs of daily life and maintain that Tao?
Well, this mind of not knowing is very important, and that's why Lao Tzu ends, this excerpt with knowledge of the future is only a flowery trapping of Tao. It's the beginning of folly. So it starts in this kind of sense that, I know what's going on. Really, like you could almost say, like, whenever you've got this sense of, I know what's going on, I know what's going to happen, I know what's right, I know what's wrong, that certainty, right? That certainty, that sense of certainty, is you're already over the edge, you could say, and on the downward slide. So that mind of not knowing, it's a real sense of humility, to bring that. You can kind of look like when, I don't know, do you have, you're watching a Sixers game and you're like, I know what's going to happen.
Oh yeah. I know we're probably going to lose this game, but sometimes we come back and win.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. And who is it who's so sure, right? Who is it that's so sure? It's Scott with all of his knowledge and information about the Sixers, and you're sitting there doing the stats. Now, I won't say there might be some real deep intuition that's coming in that is not personal, you could say, but most of the time when it's like, I know what's going to happen here, I know what's right and what's wrong, it's a very personal, individual, it's based on your body of knowledge. It actually isn't based on the broader organic, dynamic interconnectedness of what's happening. It's a very limited view.
Absolutely. And when it comes to the Sixers, I have a huge body of knowledge, but I really never know what's going to happen. And that's why I never gamble either.
I was just going to say that. Hopefully you never gamble where you might be motivated to by thinking something.
I am not permitted. If anyone's listening, I am not permitted to gamble ever, and I don't do it. But anyway, it's hard, really, with things like that. But I think it's also with business, it's hard to predict what's going to happen next, and with politics and the world. And, the news is so fascinating to me, because every day there's something else that's happening, and the universe it seems to be in flux. And I think that why this is especially helpful, though, is because you kind of try and get to a level of where you maintain a certain high level, and then the ups and downs don't really knock you off as much, I think. And is that the case, that when you start to build up, it's almost like internal defenses to external strangeness for lack of a better term.
Well, I don't necessarily like the word defenses, because that,
Right.
that gets to resistances,
Right.
but really, the way to avoid the suffering and the dissonance and the disturbance, the inner disturbance that can go along with external ups and downs, is to go through the ups and downs wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like you ride the roller coaster with your full body and mind. That's it. And when you do that, it's not really ups and downs. It's just the river.
Yeah.
Right? So the river, whether it's a turn in the river, or it's white water, or it's a waterfall, or it's calm, whatever stretch it is, the water doesn't care.
Right. The water's flowing no matter what. Right.
Water's flowing no matter what.
And you have to adjust. So one of my quotes that I always loved from that famous Zen teacher, Clint Eastwood, just kidding. But there's a movie called Heartbreak Ridge, and he tells his Marines, he says, overcome, adapt, and improvise.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Bad impression there, sorry. But overcome, adapt, and improvise. It's something that I learned a long time ago. And when my kids were growing up, I said, look, things are going to happen. You have to improvise. You have to overcome. And that's a really good lesson for everybody to just think about, because it could be really little things, or it could be big things in your life. And you have to just roll with it and stay in the present moment. That's the other thing about this, is that too much worrying about the past or the future will probably throw you off of the Tao. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. I like adapt and improvise. What do you mean by overcome? How do you
overcome obstacles?
Okay.
I feel like there's lots of my daily goals or monthly, weekly goals. There's always an obstacle.
Yeah.
Frequently it's business. Sometimes it's personal.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's health, obviously, and overcoming a health issue. I had a big health issue many years ago, and I overcame it, and I adapted to a new lifestyle, but I got myself back in, feeling good. And so that's something that's precious, obviously, is health. Mm-hmm. And I think that mental health too, when you are down about something, you need to overcome it, and you need to get yourself back in a good frame of mind. And I think that is harder sometimes than others, but I think the more you practice at that, the better you get at it. And it really helps as you grow.
Yeah. So how do you overcome a challenge like that? How do you overcome a sickness?
Well, for sickness, it's obviously, good doctors and good healthy habits, and getting a lot of rest and eating right and exercising and taking medicine when necessary. So that's part of it. But it's also preventing. I really am big on preventative things, like looking ahead as I get older and trying to prevent things from happening. I'm reading a pretty cool book about building a better brain at any age. About Alzheimer's, dementia, and things like that, and how do you do things now in your 50s that will help you in your 70s and 80s. And so part of it is just thinking ahead of where I'm going to be in that stuff, but also it's talking to you and talking to a therapist and talking to my friends, and really being a little bit vulnerable too, and admitting that things are off. And I'm very lucky, fortunate to have a really good support group of family and friends. And I found that as older I get, I'm more honest when people are like, how you doing? And it's like, well, and they're like, oh, what's going on? And I wasn't like that a while ago, but I think my desire to overcome and adapt and to get to that, maintain that higher level, I think it helps to express things that aren't going great. What do you do?
Yeah. I like those last things that you said about being vulnerable, being open with what you're actually experiencing in terms of this, quote unquote obstacle, or challenge. So, we have in Zen, this language of overcoming. I'm going to give a different kind of, at least the Zen kind of perspective on this kind of overcoming challenges. It isn't necessarily, preparing or keeping them from happening. Actually, it's about, with challenges or with problems, we kind of go into them. So it's kind of the mindset of the only way past is through, right? So if if you say overcome means to kind of avoid or go around, which you're not necessarily saying that, but to go around, then that's not the Zen approach. The Zen approach is actually to go through and to go into. So the famous koan around this is, a monk asked Master Tozan, how can we avoid the extremes of hot and cold? Okay. And so this can be a challenge, right? I mean, it could be illness. It could be anything, right? The extremes. And he said, when hot, be hot. When cold, be cold.
Nice.
So we go into it.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the same thing I was saying about the roller coaster. Be on the roller coaster. Really ride the roller coaster. So then that's what I say. You go into it and be the problem, be the challenge, then adapt. And what was it? Adapt and
overcome, adapt and improvise.
Adapt and improvise.
Yeah.
So go into it, adapt and improvise constantly in the midst of whatever the condition is.
Yeah, I think there's a quote I can't quite remember about suffering, about not running from suffering, but running to it and embracing your suffering and understanding it. I know there's a Buddha quote in there somewhere about really, we all have suffering, the first noble truth. So how do we recognize it and understand it and what caused it in order to get by it? And I think that's also a really great lesson, because a lot of people might just put their suffering aside and not deal with it, or deal with it in a not productive way. And that causes more problems, I think.
Yeah, that's right at the heart of Buddhism. It's right at the heart of Zen, is to actually, embrace that suffering with a quality of acceptance, but a quality of care and quality of holding, and then it gets transformed. But this does get right back to what we were talking about before, with higher and higher levels of embrace. You can embrace your personal suffering, then you can embrace your families, then you can embrace, and it's not all about suffering, it's about their experience. Embrace your experience intimately, and then embrace that in your family, then embrace it in your community, then embrace it in bigger and bigger wholes. And that's what brings us up to that level of the Tao, where you can't be the river unless you're really willing to feel all of the things. Feel all of the things, right? And let's face it, we don't all want to do that. We don't want to necessarily open ourselves up to those different levels. So I'm not saying that that's easy, or that's what we all should do, but it is the spiritual path to embrace at higher and higher levels. And when we do, we get higher and higher levels of resourcing and information to allow us to live our lives in a real organic way. That's why the lower level is this knowledge of the future level, but the higher level is we actually have a lot of wisdom and a lot of information that's coming through our channels, because we've opened up to our true oneness, with the universe.
Yeah. And one more question for you about the Buddha talked about the Noble Eightfold Path and reaching a level of enlightenment. And how does that compare to reaching Tao? Is it kind of parallel, or is it different?
It's parallel. Zen Buddhism is considered to be a combination of Taoism and Buddhism, right? So we say Buddhism's the father and Taoism's the mother. All right. Of Zen, which was born in China in 500 AD. So Taoism had already been in China for a while, and then Buddhism became the inseminator. It was the masculine, the father energy that came, and sort of this remarkable, amazing spiritual tradition of Taoism was there, and it got implanted with a certain kind of idea around the way that we can develop our souls, you could say, or develop ourselves to a place of experiencing the Tao. All right. So the Taoism itself, that Tao is there, but Taoism doesn't necessarily have a kind of a path and a practice to kind of move towards that. Whereas Buddhism brings that part of it in.
So if you put them together, you should be in pretty good shape.
I think so.
Right. Okay. That's what we're talking about, folks. So that was really good, actually. I never really understood the difference between those two, and you kind of put it into a very clear picture for me now. So that was excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Cool. Awesome. Well, this is a great episode. Thank you again, Paul, and thanks to all our listeners. And just wanted to remind people about Paul's awesome newsletter, which has just undergone a big change. Paul, you want to just tease out the new title? We're going to be talking about it next time.
Yeah, definitely. The new title is The Zen Shift, and it opens up my subject to be the outer shift, or the paradigm shift that we're experiencing culturally and globally, and how that can be met and how it relates to the inner shift of Zen, which is to make our shift in consciousness so that we can expand that. So I'm really excited about it. It's at thezenshift.substack.com, and love people to check it out.
Great. Awesome. And we will definitely dive deeper into that on our next episode. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in today, and thank you, Paul, as always, and we'll see everybody real soon.
It was a lot of fun, Scott. Thanks.
Thank you for joining us on this exploration into Zen Buddhism and its transformative influence on work and life. We hope you'll subscribe, share, and comment wherever you get your podcasts. May your journey be one of continuous growth and mindful living. From all of us here at Game of Zen, wishing you peace and prosperity on your path ahead.